time for some more kitchen table astronomy around the Amherst kitchen table of Hampshire College astronomer and the head of Kainat Studios, Dr. Salman Hameed. Mr. Universe, there's a lot of news coming at us. Congressman McGovern has talked about it like drinking from a fire hose, so we're trying to keep up. We're talking about budgets. What's the future of NASA when all federal funding is in jeopardy? What's the future of the National Science Foundation and more? But the thing that we can do on a small radio station in Western Mass is focus on the little things that can keep us all bound together. Now, in the frame of reference of a bigger thing, USAID and its funding is in total jeopardy. You have a personal relationship with USAID.
Yeah, so I do want to mention that there is so much stuff happening. So if you want to say, okay, hey, what is the larger theory to comment on? Well, it's impossible. And that is, whether by design or by chaos, it becomes impossible to react to it.
Right.
But I think...
I can't even keep up with all of the symbolism that Kendrick Lamar put in the Super Bowl halftime show. I've been trying to decode all that all day.
That's right. And so I think it's better to focus on smaller stories and which can actually give you an insight. And so from my perspective, since we are connected to science and astronomy and things like that, I think it's better to stick to that. And we're going to talk about, there are sort of like, this idea being floated of cutting NSF funding, for example, from $9 billion to $3 billion. That's going to have a huge impact. But at a more personal level, I know USAID in theory would not seem to be something that you and I would talk about. But actually, I want to mention that in some sense, I'm here partly, I mean, of course, because of Carl Sagan, but also because of USAID. And
here meaning that you left your home in Pakistan to come to the United States.
Yeah, and that is because in late 1980s, so height of the Cold War, there is Afghan war was going on, which is Pakistan is a very close ally of the U.S. And Pakistan is also under military dictatorship. So I should also mention sort of like, experiencing that was also part of that. But at the time, the USAID had American Center in Karachi. So I grew up in Karachi over there. And American Center was a fantastic library. And for us, so I was in high school. Going over there was this amazing experience. There was British Council, which is everywhere, but British Council seemed old, passé. It was like the faded superpower kind of thing. Like, they didn't have air conditioning, they had big ceiling fans, old colonial buildings. We were like, oh, come on. American Center had like tinted glasses. You go in, it was air conditioned, like nice fountains, water fountains outside. And you go in, and there was an sort of like an aura of coolness to it. And that wasn't by accident, it was by design, because of course that was part of the Cold War. And so you do want to impress young impressionable minds, for example. But that is not just it. The American Center Library was fantastic. That's the reason we would go. And in fact, you could actually, one of the, at the time in the 1980s, one of the sort of like, ways of growing up or signs of growing up was like, that once you get to 11th grade, you could actually get a membership to American Center. And that was like, whoa, and that's what we did. That's where I read some of my first astronomy books. Because astronomy books were not that easy to get in Pakistan, or magazines from there. And I just remember there were like these couple of books, especially one I explicitly remember, and I would go and we would go after school, just walk to American Center, I would pick out that book and just stare at those beautiful astronomy pictures at the time. No Hubble Space Telescope yet.
Yeah.
This is prior to that. And that's where I learned, that's where my interest in astronomy, which came from Cosmos, Carl Sagan's Cosmos, but then really intellectually, that's where it started to build. I was in 11th and 12th grade. And in some ways, that would have been the end of the story. And by the way, that's where I looked for colleges to apply. Like, there were these books, no internet. There were these books that you go through, which colleges to apply, and so on and so forth. But there was another connection as well, because I was, obsessed with astronomy, and I started with the help of a couple of other people, the first astronomical society in Pakistan.
I see pictures you brought out here when you were 17 years old, working with all these grown-ups, putting together this astronomical society that you as a teenager started. That's so great.
Yeah, and it was fun, but partly this society also came about through American Center because every Wednesday at 3 p.m., and I still remember it, there was a small but nice auditorium inside the American Center, and they would run NASA films. 3 to 4, there would be NASA films that would be playing. Was it part of propaganda, Cold War, da 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 da? Yes, yes, and yes. But it was also fascinating. It was also inspiring. It was also about exploration. It was also about the narrative would be about humans going to space and things like that. So yes, so USAID has multiple faces. I mean, does it try to sort of like bring democracy one way or another to other countries? Yes, it does that too. Does it potentially interfere sometimes? Yes, it does. But it also does a lot of good work from all the way from humanitarian aid in Africa and other places, all the way to just simple inspiration for young minds. I mean, that is also what USAID is doing.
Yeah, if we're going to waste our tax dollars outside of the country, I'd much rather waste it on a library and showing NASA films in Karachi than dropping bombs on anybody anywhere.
Right, and so that's where I met a couple of people, I mean, usually there won't be anybody there, or one other person would show up, but I loved their sort of like, persistence, because it didn't matter if anybody was there or not. And on Wednesday at 3 p.m., a NASA film is going to be shown. and I was one of those people. I don't care if anybody is there or not. I'm also going to be there. So that was great. But one of the things, and that's where the pictures are here for, is that with that astronomical society that we started, we got like a lot of discouragement also, as you can imagine. I'm still in high school, and and people would say, why are you wasting your time over there? Astronomy is not a big field over there. But some amazing people I also met, sort of like, who really encouraged it. But one of the places which did not flinch in encouragement was the American Center. The director of the American Center, Larry Corwin, he was a young guy, and he had just taken over as directorship and as part of the USAID. And he was like, oh, how can we help? And to me, it was just like, whoa, wait a minute. He genuinely wanted to help. And in fact, our first event, which was in 1988 in September, which was the closest approach of Mars in 17 years. So, okay, so that happens every 17 years. But remember, at that time, I am 17. So for me, it's like, oh my goodness, this is so rare that this happens. And so we were like, okay, so we want to do a symposium, which we did, which was attended by the Vice Chancellor of the Karachi University, the Director of the Planetarium, and so on and so forth. But we did actually teleconference. This is 1988. You don't have internet in that sense, but of course it's the American Center or the American consulate over there, and they're like, oh, we have satellite dishes. We can connect you. It wasn't a video teleconference, it was audio. And he was like, who do you want to talk to? And I was like, oh, Carl Sagan. And he goes like, okay, let me try. And he did really try, but Sagan, unfortunately, was busy. And he says, well, we couldn't get Carl Sagan, but everybody said that this guy, Christopher McKay, Dr. Christopher McKay. And we were like, oh, come on. But fine. As it turns out, Chris McKay is actually one of the leading astrobiologists, especially his research on Mars is actually is a cutting-edge research, and he's a really big name. I actually met him I think in 99 he came, when I was in graduate school, he came to give a talk, and I said, do you remember, we talked? And he goes like, it's all a blur. But so here are I mean, for people who cannot see pictures on the radio, but here are some pictures where we are.
I didn't even recognize you.
We are sitting on stage, and there were 5 of us who are asking Christopher McKay questions, and then there is this audience that is sitting there, and they could also later on ask questions, and so it was amazing. And in fact, American Center also then helped us with some follow-up events as well from different ones. So I just want to give a small story regarding that. It's because when people think about, I mean, right now, because we are drinking from the fire hose, in some senses, so much stuff happening. This is just a small story about both, in some sense, how USAID can impact people's lives. It certainly did mine, but also in terms of diversity, because you and I are talking, and so people talk about, well, what's the point of diversity? And in fact, we actually had this conversation a couple of weeks ago as well. Well, I'm bringing a very particular set of experiences which many people or most people in Western Mass would not have. So I can actually talk about this particular story from somebody who grew up in Pakistan, part of the Cold War, looking at the American influence or American presence in the world from a different lens. So you and I can talk about it from something that it would be hard to bring about if I was just like you, Monty.
Right. That's the importance of diversity.
Right.
Yeah. For people that criticize it, I have heard on social media saying, challenge them, make them say that they are opposed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It sounds bonkers that anybody would be, okay, maybe you don't like diversity for one reason or another, but equity or inclusion? You know what I mean?
Or accessibility.
Exactly.
The NASA site actually with DEIA, accessibility is also crucial. And I think this is something that I do want to highlight, that the way DEI is being used by the president right now and by the opponents of DEI, they just throw it for everything, and it almost represents incompetence. And
my favorite joke about that was that the groundhog last weekend popped up and there was going to be 6 more weeks of winter because of DEI.
That's right. And that is a deep problem. Jon Stewart actually on his show brought it up, because it's not just that you can actually litigate, are these people deserve this or not? That's not the issue. The problem is the framing of that is that it is making white males in particular the default. Meaning to say that if it is not white male, then it would be of suspicion. If it's white male, it's like, well, probably by merit.
Oh, definitely.
But if it's not white male, it's like, are you, or are you just a DEI hire? So I think that's where a big problem lies. And again, I would go to a very small story regarding that. And that is that NASA's DEI website is no longer available. But there was also an article related to this, which was about the first astronaut class from 1978. That included for the first time the first woman, first African-American astronaut, and so on and so forth. And it talked about sort of like, how important that was. Now, since we also get our own favorite astronaut, Katie Coleman.
Yes.
We know that thousands of applicants come in, and a handful are picked. So anybody who's picked, it's not about DEI hire. They're all deserving candidates. It's a extremely, extremely, extremely competitive thing. So that wouldn't be an issue.
But they scrubbed the page about the astronauts in 1978?
So this article was, I think, 2023, because it was talking about NASA's efforts for diversity and equity and inclusion. And that article is no longer available. So it's a small thing. Okay, why would you remove that particular article? Why would you? DEI site is no longer, but what about this small article? And it's no longer there. Similarly, there is this Vera Rubin Observatory. So Vera Rubin is an astronomer, one of the most sort of celebrated astronomers. She is sort of credited with the discovery, not the discovery, but certainly the hypothesis about dark matter. The idea of dark matter had been around for a few decades before that, but she's the one who actually really did work on individual galaxies and saw sort of evidence for dark matter, that it must be there. There's something weird going on. One of the leading astronomers over there, and the new telescope that is going to see its first light, meaning to say it's going to start operating soon in Chile. This is a big telescope, amazing. It's going to start in July, I think July or August of this year. And it's named Vera Rubin Observatory. And on that site, it actually talks about sort of her struggles as a woman, being a woman in astronomy. And then it also talks about that Vera Rubin Observatory strives for, they understand, for example, the challenges that women astronomers feel, and so on and so forth. Well, that piece, especially the second piece, is now gone. from that website. And so this is, I do want to credit, this was work done by ProPublica. It's a ProPublica article on it. And it talks about that initially, the first paragraph was also gone, which said, science is still a male-dominated... Actually, this is the paragraph that is gone. So I just want to, again, a small thing. Why would somebody go out and eliminate this particular paragraph? So this, it used to say, science is still a male-dominated field, but Rubin Observatory is working to increase participation from women and other people who have historically been excluded from science. Rubin Observatory welcomes everyone who wants to contribute to science and take steps to lower or eliminate barriers that exclude those with less privileges. That particular paragraph, somebody thought that it was objectionable in the current circumstances and has been removed. And so this is, when we are talking about small things, well, here is an example, but here is also an example of, in some sense, how small and petty these kind of things are becoming, that thinking about lowering the barriers to, like, that for historical reasons why there were those barriers there, and if you try to lower those, and recognizing that astronomy and sciences in general, although astronomy is slightly better than physics, for example, but still, that everybody knows that it has been a male-dominated field, and it has not been because women are not smart, but because of all the restrictions and challenges that come in. So trying to address that, they have removed that particular paragraph. And even more petty, there is a small thing that it says, and again, I just want to show how far some of the people are going. And then it said that more minds, this is Vera Rubin thought that more participation of more minds is going to be beneficial to astronomy. More has been changed to many. More describes sort of like, more diversity, I mean, in some sense, diverse type of minds, and that has been changed to many. And so you go like, okay, I don't know whether this directive came from Elon Musk or Trump directly, or somebody did it on their own, thinking about it. But this is just a small example of how these things come in. And in some sense, while we are figuring out how to deal with the current situation, this is why I want to focus on small examples. And if you get a chance, New York Times opinion piece on Sunday, there was a fantastic piece by M. Gessen. They have been writing, they grew up under basically Soviet Union, and then has been worked under Putin as well, and has been writing against Putin. And they have a fantastic piece, and it talks about that the biggest threat comes from anticipatory obedience. That even before an order has been delivered, people actually, for various reasons, and they give actually really good example that sometimes, for example, there is an example of a singer in Russia who said, well, was against Putin, but she ran a children's cancer hospital. And she goes like, well, my opposition versus saving children's lives, that's more important. And so she did that, and now she's in exile. But the point was, again, a lot of different things, but ultimately M. Gessen's point is that the one thing that leads to authoritarianism, that leads to these type of things, is anticipatory obedience. And that's what gives powers to authoritarians. And to me, I don't know whether this particular paragraph it's a small thing if you think about it. It's like, was it the order directly came from the White House? Or was it somebody who actually just anticipated, well, we don't know, the DEI, that may make people upset. So I think that's where we have to make a stand. Let people come in and tell you not to do that. Do not do these things before we are even asked to do it.